We've got this story from Fox 13. Gunman arrested for murder of protester despite not firing the shots. At a protest turned, well, I guess I don't know if you can call it a riot. It's in Salt Lake City with what appears to be 1,000 plus marching. A man reportedly was, quote, manipulating a rifle when some of the organizers from the event, the 50501 movement, took aim at the man who fled, and they shot at him as he was fleeing, killing an innocent bystander. This is insane. The man who fired the shots was not arrested. Fox 13 says one person has died after a shooting that occurred Saturday as protesters marched to the streets of downtown Salt Lake City following a No Kings protest. Police arrested a suspect for alleged murder, although he was not the person who fired the fatal shot. Red identified the suspect as Arturo Roberto Gamboa, who was found with an AR-15 and a gas mask. 2 additional people were detained following the shooting. They were wearing high visibility vests and armed, with Red saying they were possibly part of the march's peacekeeping team. Now, this has been confirmed. These men were, quote unquote, peacekeepers. I think about Kyle Rittenhouse. When he was threatened with death, physically attacked, and fled, and only after someone fired a shot did he turn around and a man tried to grab his gun, actually touched it, attacked him, he opened fire. As he fled, they attacked him further. And the left said he was a vigilante. The media said he was a vigilante. They claimed he murdered 3 black people. None of it ever happened. Now we have liberal organizers of the No Kings protest, the 50501 movement, involved directly with shooting and killing an innocent bystander. And they're not even arrested. Things are getting crazy. And it's hard to say if this is escalation or inter-leftist conflict. From The Guardian, U.S. Marines detain civilian in first known instance since Trump deployed troops to L.A. This is a dramatic escalation. As the No Kings protest across the country, in some instances, descended into rioting. Now, my friends, we're going to be joined by Andy Ngo. He's an expert on all of this stuff, and he knows a lot about who these people are, what went down. So let's pull in Andy right now. We're going to grab that camera here, get it all set up. I believe we have our sources synced. Video room is currently loading. We've got Andy. Andy, can you hear me? Can you hear and see me, Andy? No.
I do. Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining.
My pleasure.
Can you, do you want to give a brief, just a real quick, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, my name's Andy Ngo. I am an independent journalist, most known for reporting on Antifa, Tarantifa, and the violent far left. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon.
So you've experienced on the ground, of course. You've written a book about it, Unmasked. You've been physically attacked on more than one occasion. This past week and into the weekend, we've seen an escalation of far left riots. The No Kings protest, of course, in certain areas of the Pacific Northwest devolved into just outright riots. But we have this story of these peacekeepers who shot and killed a guy, and they arrested somebody else. This is pretty confusing. Out of Salt Lake City. Can you break down what happened with that, who these people are, and why they arrested this other guy?
The story is confusing because, well, once I explain it, you'll understand why. There are a lot of Democrat and liberal media narratives at risk. We've been told now for the last couple of days that the No Kings protests that happened nationwide were peaceful, and this was a lawful demonstration against the authoritarian tendencies of President Trump. But as you mentioned a moment ago, there were some places where there were violence that devolved, in Portland in particular, after the main demonstration. But in Salt Lake City, Utah, it turned deadly. Yesterday, the Salt Lake City police did a press conference detailing how a suspect had been charged with murder, and they released his name, Arturo Gamboa. And the reaction online from those who read the headlines was they thought it was potentially a Trump supporter or some right-wing maniac who brandished a rifle and killed a anti-Trump protester. But that's not what happened at all, according to the police and according to footage that has emerged. The shooting happened by the shots were fired by a so-called volunteer peacekeeper. So this is a liberal demonstration. For those who don't know sort of the background, the No Kings event, it was organized by nearly 200 Democrat aligned unions, PACs, nonprofits, activist groups, etc., all on the left. And at the protests in Salt Lake and in other cities, they did not want a large, visible police presence because there's still anti police sentiment among the mainstream left going back now for a long time because of BLM, and also because they blame police for um, potentially allying with federal law enforcement. So some places had their own volunteer peacekeepers, which are just left-wing liberal protesters who don a vest and have a task of maintaining peace. And a peacekeeper may have misjudged a situation because a radical leftist who came allegedly with a rifle, and you can see in the video he was holding something that looked like a rifle, did not appear to be brandishing it at anyone's. A peacekeeper fired shots in the direction of the radical Latino leftist and grazed him only, and instead killed a innocent bystander who was part of the protest. A Samoan American man died. And so the radical Latino leftists, Mr. Gamboa is the one that's been charged with murder, even though he is not accused of firing any rounds. The so-called peacekeeper has not been named at all by authorities, and it's unclear if he will be facing any charges. Salt Lake City Police is asking for people who have video or photo evidence to submit it to them in their investigation.
But so this guy they arrested, you were saying the video, he doesn't appear to be brandishing. He's not pointing it at anybody or anything like that?
In a video, which is somebody from high up on a building is panning over in the crowd, and they just happen by coincidence to catch the shooting as it's happening. And you see a person who is identified as the murder suspect, the radical leftist, running away. He's dressed all in black. He's running away. His rifle appears to be pointed at the ground, and you see a person wearing a bright vest, the alleged so-called peacekeeper, firing rounds in the direction of the Latino man, and a person standing nearby was shot dead.
This is a very, very weird story. Like, I've compared this with the Kyle Rittenhouse case where he was threatened with death, he was attacked, and he fled. And only after someone fired a shot behind him did he turn around, got attacked again, shot. He killed that man Rosenbaum. He tried to go to the police, was attacked again. This is a weird story where it appears, you're saying there's video of what appears to be one of these liberal peacekeepers. I understand it, were associated with the 5051. It's the stupidest name because you got to explain it's 50501. It appears they shot at this guy for no reason. I from everything I've read and as you're describing it now, it sounds like there's a far left Antifa guy. He's got a rifle. Some other guy points the rifle at him, so he runs, which I think a lot of people might do if they get a rifle pointed at him. And then this 50501 guy starts shooting into the crowd. Yet they didn't arrest him. They didn't call this a liberal mass shooter or anything like that. It's just, I'm quite confused as to how this is how it played out.
So it was the peacekeeper who pointed a pistol, and fired it, not
it was a pistol.
rifle, by the way. The radical leftist is the one with the rifle, but
interesting.
He has it on him and he's running away. It's pointed at the ground as he's running away. We don't know if he was brandishing it at anybody. That's not part of the allegations, and no footage has emerged of that. And to explain a bit more of the context for people who might be confused, understandably, at a lot of these left-wing demonstrations, these radical anarchist communist revolutionary types, which, by the way, the social media that is alleged to belong to the Latino guy, he would have those views. They go to these demonstrations to act sort of with firearms, to act as in their minds a deterrent to any white supremacists or far right who might want to threaten the left-wing protesters. I can imagine a situation, because it's happened before, where these militants on the radical left who come with tactical gear, they're dressed in all black, they're wearing masks, and they're open carrying weapons. Other people who don't know who they are might misinterpret and assume that they're some type of far right MAGA threat, and confront them or something. And in this case, it turned deadly. It remains to be seen if that's actually what happened, but that there's no evidence so far that the man actually charged with murder um, was threatening to anybody other than opening carrying, but that's lawful in the state of Utah. And for why he's been charged with murder, a lot of states in their criminal statutes on murder, it can include, if you create the conditions where somebody gets killed, you don't necessarily have to be the one who pull the trigger or stab somebody, for example. But if you create the conditions for
Yeah,
where somebody is killed, you can be charged.
I think what they were saying is that this Gamboa guy was in the process of committing a felony, and then someone died, so therefore it's his fault. But the question is, I don't know. I mean, we could check. Is it legal to open carry a rifle in Salt Lake City? I'd imagine it is. Maybe there's some restriction on him, or I don't know if that's come up in your investigation.
I'm not aware of any restrictions for open carrying in Salt Lake City. I might have, maybe people who are watching live can then correct me if I'm inaccurate on that. But it just shows how sort of paranoid liberals in the left are. Like, they think everybody is a Proud Boy or a white supremacist
Right.
seeking to kill them. And they've targeted a lot of people, not killed them, but violently assaulted people with just like all it needs is just like a drop of an idea that this person is somehow on the right, and then it's fair game to beat them up, rob them, or in this case, fire shots into a crowd in that direction and be reckless with it.
What do you think would have happened if the peacekeeper, they're calling him, I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but what if that was a uniformed police officer who fired live rounds into a crowd of No Kings protesters? How do you think the media and the liberals would be reacting?
We would get some type of reaction, maybe similar to 2020. It's all about sort of convenient victims and convenient perpetrators for the radical left and liberal media. Accuracy doesn't really matter. It's about what narrative is being reinforced. So the No Kings protest is still being called peaceful when you have somebody who was shot dead, just a person who was attending. And this story sort of just swept under the rug now.
This is surprising to me. I tweeted this morning. I said something like, so a far left extremist with a rifle, freaked out some other far left extremists who then shoot into the crowd, killing a random person. So the cop arrests the extremist who was running and not the guy who was shooting. The response I got from people was, huh? I was surprised. I thought this was something everybody was going to know about. I thought this was going to be like major trending news, especially considering local media reports said that it was the group 50501. I hate their name, by the way, had said one of our people was involved in this. We were involved in this. And they were saying things like, we had to make a very difficult decision, when this happened, and it's a tragedy, blah, blah, blah. But I think you're right when you say it's being swept under the rug and people aren't discussing this. This should be a massive story. This is, you go out peacefully at one of these events, and these are private organizations, liberal organizations, that have armed, unsanctioned individuals. These are not legally sanctioned individuals walking around with guns, trained and ready to kill if they perceive a threat. And that's exactly what happened. But I will move on a little bit, because you mentioned that they're still calling these protests peaceful, but I'm seeing videos, once again, out of like Seattle, Portland, and other areas where these extremists are trying to break into ICE facilities, where they're fighting with police. Can you tell us what was going on up there?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of protests that are happening, and I think people might be confused on what's what. So there's been the ongoing insurrections that first started in LA now over a week ago. And so there's already been days of violence in LA, in Portland, in Seattle. And then the No Kings protests coincided on Saturday with this sort of larger insurrection. In Portland, the rioters that were trying to burn down the local ICE facility again had their numbers bolstered by people who, once the No Kings demonstration was over, which was peaceful in Portland, then some of those people were brought over or encouraged to go to the ICE facility where the rioters launched another very violent attack on the building and smashed open the front doors, which are glass, and with the intent to go inside to burn it down from the inside.
Whoa.
Because the fires that they had set on the outside had failed to make the building catch on fire. And the building is next to a elementary school, by the way. I've been on the ground a lot in that area, not in this particular case, but in prior years, because in 2018, when there were a lot of lies and incitement to violence against ICE at that time during the first Trump administration. Remember what we were told about family separations and all the hysteria about that. Antifa, really many of the same people that are involved in violence now in Portland, violently overtook the ICE facility in Portland, attacked it, had blocked off every exit and entrance, and created a hostage situation. And there aren't very many federal officers who can just mobilize on an instant to go and respond. They have to fly people in, drive people in. It takes a day or two to mobilize that. So for hours, whilst staff inside were calling Portland Police 911 for help, the Portland Police declined to provide any assistance, saying that, well, this is federal property, so it's your problem.
Wow.
The response this time is a little bit different. We have a new mayor who, he's woke, but he also remembers what happened to Ted Wheeler when Ted Wheeler tried to placate Antifa for many, many years. And the Portland police have responded to the rioters on the street. So at least they're doing something. They're not going on the federal property to try to restore order, but at least the crimes that are being committed immediately in front of the building, because the street is shut down and Antifa are bringing blockades and other things into the street and terrorizing this residential community, by the way. So there were 4 arrests last night. There were 3 the night before. A couple of nights ago, there were 10 arrests. So we're just over 15 arrests now from 5 days of attacks on the ICE facility in Portland. And then in Seattle, it's also really violent. This was not connected to the No Kings protest, even though it fell on the same day. It was just part of the daily violence that federal property and officers and agents face now. So there's a DHS building right by Seattle in a different city called Tukwila. And so Seattle Antifa, after carrying out multiple nights of arson attacks and vandalism on the federal building downtown, they went to this DHS building and created a blockade similar to what they did in Portland in 2018. They were trying to prevent anybody from coming in or out. And there's some viral footage of, these mass militants with their arms locked and these sort of things that they've dragged onto the street to create a blockade. But what they didn't know was that at least in Washington state, at this building, there were federal officers who were ready. They were inside and they responded very quickly and shut it down. They pepper sprayed and cleared the crowd, the rioters, and basically kicked open that blockade, and the DHS vehicles, ICE vehicles were able to drive away, potentially with detainees inside, we don't know. And that really angered Antifa. So then at night, they went downtown to where they had been attacking the federal building. They returned to that and started fires, vandalized the building. There were a number of really violent assaults over the weekend on journalists by Seattle Antifa. So Brandy Cruza, who's a really great Seattle-based independent YouTuber. Your followers should check out her content. She's this woman young woman who's gone independent now, but she worked for the local I forget which affiliate. It might have been a Fox affiliate, but she was in legacy media for a long time in Seattle, and now she's independent. And she's been quite critical of left-wing political violence. And anytime you do that, you become a target, unfortunately, speaking from experience.
Yeah.
And Brandy, she came with security outside that Tukwila facility, and the rioters assaulted her security. They tried to blind her with some chemical spray in the eyes. They hurled all this water and liquid and unknown stuff all over her and threatened her. They're quite emboldened, and it was caught on video. There were other journalists who recorded it. And then at night, Cam Higby, who's a incredible young citizen journalist who goes across the country at great risk to himself to cover these riots. I mean, you used to cover riots. I used to cover riots. You know how dangerous it is, and how, why a lot of people stop, because you get targeted. So Cam was undercover, and the militants were looking for him. They found him and they beat him. He was very, very lucky that he was wearing a helmet because they were beating him on the head. His helmet was dented. He had to go to the hospital the next day because he was bleeding from his nose when he was sleeping, and he's diagnosed with a concussion. So he's lucky that he's alive.
Wow.
For one. This is the type of violence in Seattle. The response from the mayor and the governor, Democrats run Washington State at basically every level. So they sort of set the narrative. They're describing these protests as peaceful, and their condemnations are only directed towards their political targets. Like a few weeks ago, there were Christians who did a Christian worship rally in Cal Anderson Park, which is where Chaz was. And they were condemned by the mayor and the governor as these like far-right Christian nationalists. And they had nothing really to say about the masked violent organizers who came to attack people. So I reluctantly describe Antifa as a unofficial paramilitary of the Democrats, in the sense that the relationship is not official. Like, Democrats are not directing Antifa to attack this or do this or that, but rather it's like the Democrats would create the conditions where Antifa feel empowered to be violent and criminal, because they know that they'll have sort of a protection of those who are in power. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
Man, it is getting really, really crazy out there. This past weekend, I think, is crazy. I think we'll probably end up seeing more this week. But for those that are watching, where can they find you?
I am on nocomment.com. That's my Substack, ngocomment.com. No comment.
And then you got an X account?
I do. It's Mr. Andy NGO.
Andy, I really do appreciate you joining and explaining all this for us. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Have a good one. All right. That was the intrepid journalist Andy No, who joined us. Little shorter interview today, but Andy's a busy guy. He's a busy guy doing a lot of really great work out there. And so in the meantime, we'll just jump over and pick up some of this other news that's been going on. I think probably the more interesting and most notable is the Marines have actively gotten involved on the ground, detaining individuals. And this was the first time in potentially generations, because it is rare that we see U.S. military actually involved with U.S. law enforcement. We have this from The Guardian. U.S. Marines detain civilian in first known instance since Trump deployed troops to L.A. This is from the 13th on Friday, in fact. They say Marines took charge of the Wilshire Federal Building early on Friday in a rare domestic use of U.S. troops after days of protest over immigration raids. Reuters images showed Marines apprehending a civilian, restraining his hands with zip ties, and then handing him over to civilians from DHS. Asked about the incident, the U.S.'s Northern Command spokesperson said active duty forces may temporarily detain an individual in specific circumstances. Any temporary detention ends immediately when the individuals can be safely transferred to the custody of appropriate civilian law enforcement. About 200 Marines arrived in L.A. on Friday morning. Of course, we have seen their deployment. And now, of course, the No Kings protests sees violence in some instances. As we explained, and as Andy No explained, not all of the violence over the weekend was associated with the No Kings protest. No Kings is a more of a mainstream liberal event. That being said, you take a look at this instance, and we've got ourselves the makings of a very serious scandal As I mentioned to Andy, I was very shocked to find that when I tweeted about this, people were responding totally confused, having no idea what I was talking about. In one instance, someone thought I was talking about a shooting from 5 years ago. This happened over the weekend. And one of the groups that is organizing with no kings pulled out. I didn't realize it was a pistol. So this is why we talked to Andy. No, right? He tracks this stuff. He's investigating these things. Pulled out a pistol and fired into a crowd indiscriminately at somebody who apparently wasn't doing anything. Now, what I do want to do is look up I'll say this. What are the open carry rules in Utah? Because I'm curious as to what makes what this guy Gamboa did a felony. I don't like the far left, okay? Now, in Utah, 21 and up, permitless open carry is allowed of a loaded or unloaded firearm. I'm assuming this guy, I believe he was 28 years old. The question is, what did the guy they arrested do that was a felony? They even say this from Fox 13, despite not firing the shots. I believe what we're seeing right now, and the reason why the story isn't as well known, is that the liberal organizers of this event were involved in this. Let me pull this one up. We've got this. I want to grab this quote for you and make sure you guys can see it. From UtahNewsDispatch.com, they have a quote. It's in a Facebook post on Sunday morning. Utah 50501, the group that organized the protest, said, quote, "Our team was directly involved. We have been in direct contact with law enforcement. Some of you seem to think that a keyboard and social media gives you a free pass to be nasty and accusatory. Our teams just had to deal with something extremely traumatizing, and when faced with personal risk to their own lives, chose to run towards the danger." No, it actually sounds like from the evidence we have, they created the danger. The organizers themselves shot and killed a guy and have not been charged. This is insane. They say, "We respectfully ask you to refrain from speculation about the alleged shooter's motives and identity. That information will come out soon enough." Hold on. The shooter's motives and identity? He was part of your group you were involved with, and he was shooting at a guy he was scared of. We know about his motive. Are they implying the guy who didn't fire a shot and had a rifle was a shooter? This is insane. They say it is better to wait for the facts, even though it is difficult given the emotional and charged nature of the incident. The group said in a separate Facebook post. This was a horrific moment of violence in a historic day of thousands of Utahns exercising their rights to protest. Nothing will ever change the undeniable strength of the community. Why aren't the police grabbing the guy who did it? I don't understand, unless they are trying to cover up who this guy is and what was actually going on. As Andy No pointed out, there is video that shows this guy. Rifles pointed down and he's running away. Now, I ask you this. They said we were directly involved. That's 50501. They organized the protest. So protest organizers directly involved. It's their guy who shot. In what reality do you shoot at a man running away? Honest question. If this guy, if the police know there's a guy who's already killed and he's armed and may kill again, yeah. But a person armed running from you does not present an active threat that you can kill him over. This is insane. Now, we are about rounding out this show. I do want to grab some of your Rumble rants. Coletown992 says, Bolton won. I hope not, man. That's in reference to Iran. John says, trolls are thick today. God bless the U.S. and Israel. If Congress declared war, Trump would have no choice but to join the war. He would then only have a say in how it is fought. Indeed, but he could still have it fought in a way that de-escalates U.S. involvement. Guido says, I feel like it's less a false flag that is faked and more a give as many targets to them as possible and hope they take the bait. I agree with that. Let's see. The D-Vault points out that Iran has called for the death of America and Israel. You don't need to believe the news. You can watch the videos. Indeed, we know that they do this, in fact. The question is, why would the U.S. be involved in a regional conflict? It's really sad to look at what's happened in Iran since the revolution. People used to be rather Western. Now they're a deeply fundamentalist Islamic nation. I still don't think the U.S. should be the world police going and telling everyone else how to live their lives. Our sergeant says the news is covering the two reps that got shot My liberal local newscaster asked the question, are people emboldened to commit political violence because January 6th, rioters had been pardoned? It's fascinating, isn't it? The left engages in violence endlessly for the past 20 plus years. Remember back at the RNC I think it was in Minnesota, where leftists had Molotov cocktails in a van and they arrested a bunch of these guys? I remember that. We then get all of the protests throughout the 2010s. Not necessarily the Occupy movement itself. And I have no problem with, Andy points out, No King's largely peaceful. Something's going on with these guys shooting, that's for sure. The right has one riot, a bad riot for sure, but one riot. They launch a manhunt for these people. They hunt them down, lock them in solitary. And the question is the right emboldening people? I don't know. I'd have to think that when a liberal organizer, associate of this group that is doing the organizing, shoots and kills a guy by firing indiscriminately into a crowd, and you don't arrest him, you're emboldening violence. It's getting crazy out there, my friends. I don't know where things go. I really don't. I will just tell you all, man. My friends, I do think violence is going to escalate. Younger people are hyperpolarized. They've seen enough and they want action. They want something to be done about it. But the left is more violent and the right is well, I wouldn't necessarily say that the right is more violent. I would argue the left is more violent. We've seen the riots across the board. We see what they agree with. The right is more action-oriented. The right wants the law to be used to go after these people and shut them down and lock them up. Both sides want an escalation in the use of force against their political opponents. I don't see how we escape any of this. It's generational. Now, my friends, we will be sending y'all over to join our good friend. I believe we've got Russell Brand today. Let me make sure. Sometimes it's different. Yep, we got Russell Brand gearing up to go live to talk about U.S. involvement in Iran and the assassin in Minnesota, which is another huge story here, by the way. Very little information about. Let me get that raid going for you guys. Make sure you smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. I really do thank you guys for joining me today. And we're back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. You don't want to miss it. Tell everyone you know to watch the show. 31,000, 32,000 people watching this live. If y'all shared this link right now on the live page for Rumble, we'd have the biggest show in the world. That's what it's all about. So when was the last time you talked to your ma? You say, hey, ma, you watching Timcast IRL or Timcast Morning News? You got to do it. Thank you all so much for hanging out, my friends. Stay tuned. We've got more segments to come. And, of course, we're back for 8 p.m., and we'll see you all then.